statement in the book that says, we know but a little, more will be added. People will come after us and add on to it. So the point is, where he talks about it's very important to get to the exact nature of the wrong. So let's say if you, I'll start in a minute. So a lot of times, this isn't a replacement for AA. It's sort of like if you had an incredible spiritual revelation and you were diabetic, would you stop shooting insulin? No, because the diabetes is of the body. Yeah? So the brain is of the body. Yeah? And in recovery, the problem resides in the mind, or the conditional mind that's being produced through the brain, so to speak. Yes? So alcoholism, in a way, is a mental and physical illness. I don't believe it's a spiritual ailment because I don't think spirit can get sick. I don't think spirit has qualities that can go bad or get better. I really don't. I think spirit is more like ever-present awareness. It doesn't deviate, doesn't oscillate, it doesn't get bigger or smaller. It just is, let's say. Yeah? So I don't think there's a spiritual malady. I think there's a mental malady. And the mental malady dominates our interest and attention, so then the spirit seems to be forgotten. And that's what opens up all the problems because, a lot of this is just, you really know the problem from the solution. When you get relief or when something happens and relief from the bondage of self stabilizes, you start understanding what the problem was. So let's say in a lot of time in your life, there was irritability, restlessness, and discontent and not much peace. And then let's say peace becomes a dominant possibility. Plug it in somewhere. Yeah? Then you say from the point of peace, you look back at, that's why. What was there to, let's say, exclude peace being available? And then you'll see the problem. Yeah? So from the solution, when you get relief from it, you'll look back at when you didn't have relief and you'll see the culprit. Yeah? It's as simple as that. You can't really. You want to press that red button? We'll just start going now? Yeah. Hold on, wait a minute. I got to get this one too. I got 3 things to turn on. If I've had a successful night, one of them gets turned on. I'm going to try to do good tonight. So wait. So basically what I'm sharing is out of hindsight. It's from the solution. So something happened with me, and from there, the problem was revealed, basically. When I was knowing the problem from the problem, there wasn't really any solution there. And when you know the solution from the problem, it's not really the solution. Yeah? The solution, when seen from the solution, has the ability to stabilize and allow you to start traveling lighter throughout your life. Yeah? It doesn't say that your life's going to get great, but as an action figure, this is what this body is. Whatever geography your life has in store for you, you'll travel lighter over it. And after that happens for quite a while, you'll see that's really an incredible freaking gift. Because the mental state, as we know, makes a lot of mountains out of molehills. Yeah? So we're not seeing anything right size because there really is no right size. We give it all the meaning it has based on our condition. Yeah? So there's a famous thing in recovery. If you go to meetings, you'll hear a lot of people share about the worst thing that ever happened to them in their life. And maybe they've had a story that had happened when they were 5 or 8 years old, and now that worst story is the basis of excusing themselves for failed marriages and not being able to hold jobs, and everything is really rooted back to this worst thing that ever happened to them. And then let's say they get sober, and after a few years of participating in sobriety, recovery, they look at it, the worst thing that ever happened to them, as the best thing that ever happened to them. So you've got to look at it, was it the worst thing and then it transformed somehow into the best thing? Or was it neither? It was the way you were seeing it, yeah? So the same situation, if you see it from one way, it looks like the worst thing that ever happened. And the same situation, if you see it from a different point of view, it's the best thing that ever happened. That's what's going on here. And someone wanted me to share. It says it in the foreword of the big book. We are 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It doesn't say hopeless state of mind and body, and a lot of people share it and they drop the seemingly out. But the seemingly is the key, because seemingly means it appears to be true or false to you. So basically, in a sense, everything is seemingly so here. Yeah? Its so-ness is resting on you more than you resting on it. Yeah? In other words, you're giving everything all the meaning it has, a statement out of the Course in Miracles, if you never have heard that book. So you and I give everything all the meaning it has. So therefore, things do not precede us. We precede things. Yeah? And the whole point, so here, you were 100 men and women who recovered from a seemingly hopeless state in mind and body. And then they go on and say the problem resides in the mind. So if people are in their first year of sobriety, that's the most important year, because if the problem resides in the mind, you do not want your thought system to have much of a say concerning your sobriety. So you have to do what we do here and then get the habits put in place. And a habit is an action without thought. And those habits are the greatest insurance policy to sobriety. What happened my first year, everything, all the 27 years later have been based on that. So I don't think about, should I go to an AA meeting? I think about which one. Yeah? So I'm in the habit. So now my habits are supporting, or like God rails, G-O-D rails, that don't keep the spirit, they keep the action figure on the straight and narrow. Because it's the action figure that swerves off. It's the mental state where the problem resides. Yeah? So there's a statement in page 64. This was one of the biggest changes for me. I had the privilege of leading fourth step workshops in recovery. If you don't know what they are, that's the inventory process. So basically, people who come in recovery, we hit a point where you need to take an inventory of your life, and the three topics we look at are resentments, which means re-feelings, yeah? Fears and harming other people in the pursuit of what we want, and we look specifically at sexual behavior. Yeah? How our sexual wants caused a lot of suffering, not just with the people we had sex with, but like the kids of the woman that we cheated on and whatever. Yes, all that. So by looking at that, it's the reason why is we want to see something. We want to see how self has defeated us. Yeah. So this is the statement on page 64. I think it says, being convinced, which means to believe with certainty, that self, and my sense of self, my definition of self is the sense, it's not really a feeling, it's a vague sense of being a long-lasting, independent, separate entity, a thing, a body. Yeah? So let's say self, manifested in a lot of different ways, yeah, has defeated us. Now we're the us. Yeah? And then there's this foreign installment, or I like to look at it as a parasitical movement. So this parasitical movement of self. And so self manifested in all these different ways, and if you want to look at a dictionary and look up self, and you'll see self hyphen and about 140 different adjectives and attributes. And if you total them up, about 90 you would call negative, and maybe 20 are seemingly positive. So you're basically fucking behind the eight ball immediately. Because it's like self-immolation, self-destruction, self-loathing, self-this, self-that, self-this. And then self-love and but I mean, really, so here's self manifested, and manifested means it's appearing as, yes? Mm-hmm. Manifested in various ways. So pity, self-pity, self, hatred again, self, whatever, Those are the various ways. Has defeated us. Now, the difference is obvious. In the big book by Bill W., self is one thing and us is another. Yeah. So how does self, this one little idea, this one foreign installment, defeat so many people. That's the important thing to see, because my belief is, humbly, how it has been revealed to me, it is an obsession with self. That's what the mental state does to reinforce the identification as a self. It's usually different, because all the obsessions you have, there's still a feeling that it's you that's having all the different obsessions. What's that sense of you that has the obsessions? To me, that's where the bondage is. It's not, the obsessions are being used to bond you to this idea of being a self. So it says very clearly, self, being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. He says, if you're convinced of this, the first paragraph, hey guys, the Staten Island contingent, the first, so, come on, there's chairs here, Mitch. Come on in here.
All right, let me get some water.
All right. So self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. Yeah? I don't know where I was with that. Staten Island, that's where it defeated me. Staten Island has defeated many, there's one self called Staten Island, and it's defeated many hosts. And even if you visit there, it'll defeat you. So self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. Okay? So the obsession, so how does self defeat us? And then next statement it says, resentment is the number one offender. So if you really listen, follow this logic, and then listen to people that you speak with in recovery and see the difference, they're saying resentments and fear and acting out are manifestations of self, not your manifestations. We're the us, yeah? So this foreign installment or parasite is using the host to express itself through. That's what they do in nature. That's what they're doing in this case, yeah? But while they're expressing through us, the host, because it's identified as the parasite, keeps claiming the parasite's expressions as their own. That's the bondage. The bondage isn't resentment, it's my resentment. The my. It's not fear, it's my fear. It's not it's not the doing, it's the doer of it, yeah? That's where the bondage is. And if it's like it says in recovery in the book, it says the person who's run by self will be virtuous and kind. See? It can claim both attributes. It can be a good person or a bad person, but there'll be the implication there's one person that's doing both. That's the bondage. And the bondage of is different than bondage to. Yeah? Bondage to would be, here's a chair, and here I am, and the chair's a real thing, I'm a real thing, and then there's some spiritual handcuffs that bind me to this idea of self, and if I could find the right divine spiritual keysmith, he would release me from the bondage to self, and then I'd walk away from self, and I'd be free from it. But it's bondage of, just sort of like when in Old England, the son would be called Robert of Sam, you know what I mean? So Robert came from Sam. So bondage comes from self. Without self, there's no bondage. Bondage is of self. Yeah? Just like Robert is of Sam, or Paul is of Rockville Center. You know what I mean? Mitch is of Staten Island. Very recognizable. So the of is, there's a certain state, and one of the manifestations of that state is bondage. Yeah? But the bondage is of that state. So the state is the self. The bondage is of self. So in my view, let's say if a big bug flew in here right now, big bug, and it landed on you, you would knock it off, right? Immediately. There would be no thought, knock it off. And maybe 30 times in a row, you'd knock it off. But this parasite, understanding how hostile it is to the host, has the greatest strategy of all strategies. It convinces the host that it's the parasite. So you and I cannot entertain being free from it. We can only entertain being free as it. That's why it doesn't fucking work. The freedom isn't as a self, or through a self, or by a self, or for a self. It's from. From. So I humbly believe the exact nature of the seeming wrong is identification as a self. There is no self to be identified with. It's a verb. And the verb is produced by listening to the thought system, which I call selfing. Yeah? So the thought system, if you watch it, the thought system, when you are thought about, you're thought about as a body. When you're thought about 5 years ago, the only way the thoughts picture you is as a body. That's the only way you could be thought about. You can't be thought about as a spirit. Oh, my spirit was at 5th and Canarsie. No, you can't locate your spirit. It's everywhere. The body can be locatable in time and space, and then the thoughts coagulate around that because thinking is always about something. Thinking is always about something. You're thinking about, and that's all it is. The mental state thinks about you as a body in the past, it thinks about you as a body in the future, and it's remembering you as a body now. So now the nature of spirit is replaced by a body's nature. So now you take yourself, either the mental and the physical, and now insanely you want to become spiritual, but not as spirit, because that would totally blow the whole journey. Why would spirit start looking for spirit, but as a body brain? Good luck. This is, I don't care how much spirituality you graft on the skin, it's not going to take, because no thing and thing don't take. They're like oil and water. So the whole point is the parasite, the problem resides in the mind, and it's an activity, and all the thoughts are being used to, like a great master, Ramana Maharshi, says it this beautiful way. It says, there's a presupposing, which this is beautiful really, a presupposing of a non-existent thing. This is non-existent thing without life moving through it. I've seen, when I was young, there was one of my favorite uncles was Uncle Fred, and he used to pass me $1 at relatives' parties behind his back, so my mother wouldn't see. So of course, I liked him because he was paying me off every relatives' party. So then he passed away, and my mother and I went to the funeral, and my mother said, all right, we're going to go up to the casket and say goodbye to Uncle Fred. So I go up to the casket, and I looked in the casket, and it was an instantaneous hit. That's not Uncle Fred. The body was there, but it was inert. There was no life in it. And now in hindsight, I realized I saw it as clear can be, and I saw the spirit all the while the spirit was living as Uncle Fred, as the body, because I was seeing the spirit while I was living as Paul the body. So when I saw Uncle Fred's body without spirit, I knew damn well that wasn't Uncle Fred. The body ain't it. Yeah? This is it. So the selfing presupposes that you're a thing. It insinuates that you're a thing. It assumes that you're a thing. It implies that you're a thing. But it can never make you a thing because you're something else already. Spirit. You're not up for grabs. You're not like this vague nothingness that could be spirit. Whoever grabs you first, body or spirit, you are of a spiritual nature. That which is looking out of all our eyes isn't a thing. Seeing doesn't have an arm that reaches out and sees the street, yeah? There's no thing. What's looking out of all our heads isn't a thing. You want to call it consciousness or what, but it's definitely not a thing, and the thing isn't looking. The eyes facilitate seeing, but they're not seeing. If some dead body hadn't been hurt up here, they could take that dead eye out, which isn't seeing anything ever again, put it in a live body, and would facilitate seeing. As soon as consciousness was available, there would be seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. Without it, your ears can be perfect, they're never going to hear another freaking note. So let's get the cart in front of the horse. Let's see what actually precedes everything. And it ain't you and I as a body. That is not the Alpha and the Omega. What they say in AA, conscious contact, my sense of that is consciousness, spirit is in contact. That's the first thing, yes? Then the mental state implies that you're a body. That's the second event. The second event presupposes it's before the first event. So now you believe you're the one that's seeing, you're the one that's hearing, you're the one that's feeling, you're the one that's tasting, and you're the one that's touching, and it's not so. Listen to people share. They'll say, oh, I didn't want to feel that. What came first? The feeling. Then they came afterwards, and I didn't want to feel that, but it's too late, they felt it. We're a Johnny-come-lately constantly. We're an afterthought that implies it's before thought. This is the whole ripoff. It's the heist of all heists. And it's using you and I for transportation. And didn't you feel like you were possessed when you got loaded? Like a parasite took over, and basically it used you for transportation. Really. Because it can't go out and drink. It's got a huge impediment. It doesn't have a mouth. It's got to use a mouth that's available to it, which is us, and it has to convince us to go where we know we shouldn't go. And it works on us feverishly, and it brings us to a point, which is I call it's the disease's idea of surrender, which is fuck it. It brings us to fuck it. We reach fuck it, and we go fuck it. And then I'll drink and shoot up or I'll cheat on my wife or anything because all bets are off. The thing has us. We're all overmatched. Literally. And you know what? Power doesn't respect anything other than power. And when the little dog is masquerading as the big dog and there's no big dog to be seen, it's going to fucking bite your ass constantly. But what happens when the big dog shows up? The little dog rolls over. And that's the whole point. As soon as, let's say, the spiritual condition, I don't like that terminology, but let's use it. Once the spiritual condition becomes obvious, and it becomes obvious when the mental condition diminishes. When you get out of self, then you feel available. When you do service, don't you? You do service, and it's almost like you missed the whole journey, which is your ass getting pulled out of your head, your head getting pulled out of your ass, but then you're available. And you feel better, and things feel bigger. Then you sense a presence. You call a higher power. But immediately, the selfing arises and says it's you that's feeling it. And then you're up the ass of self again. And then you need a divine proctologist to pull you out. Literally. And that's what happens. It happened tons of times until once. One time, it happened again. I came out, felt available, felt the presence. But this time, the presence, I saw that's what I am. I'm the presence, yeah? And therefore, I'm always available. And if I'm always available, I'm of service. That's totally different than doing service. Of service is an attitude. It's not an action. And if you're available, you're going to be of service. Because that's all that service is availability and holding space. So here, what I see is the thought system has one movement. I call it the selfing. It uses perceptions, it uses memory, and it uses thoughts to constantly insinuate you're a body. And when you're being thought about, look at the thought system. It sees you as a body. That's all it does. Yeah? And look at the thought system. What does it value? It's happening now, but are the thoughts about now? Or are they about yesterday and tomorrow? The thoughts we're hearing, are they about now? They're happening now, but they're not about now. They're about yesterday and tomorrow. So that's this value system. So if it's like a fucking crazy GPS, you know? Really it is. I mean, if you're relying on it, you hit the button, all right, tonight I'd like to be happy, joyous, and free. So it tells you what to do. By 12 o'clock, you're in the police station. You know? What? To get out of jail, you get over it. The next 2 nights later, you go out, you hit, hey, GPS, please, wise one. Let me have a good time tonight. Okay, good time. Jail again. Yeah? Why? The maps are from 1954. And for some of us, they lead to 3 destinations: institution, jails, and death. How could you see we're so unique? If you took a giant sociological study of addicts and alcoholics, all different ethnicities, all different financial levels, all different intellectual levels, yet many of us park at the same 3 parking spaces. Institution, jails, and death. You got to see there's one driver on this whole fleet of cars. And it's the parasite called alcoholism. And the only way you're going to get free from it is seeing you're not it. There's no fucking way. So here, you go to meetings. This is what happened with me. Went to meetings, came in, had this huge, thick shell of terminal uniqueness. Unbelievable. No one felt like I did. No one thought like I did. No one did the heinous things that I did. And then I was listening to people for about 3 months, and they're sharing their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions. And I could only come to 2 conclusions. How did they get my thoughts? Or they're not my thoughts. This was a huge revelation. Because as soon as I saw the thoughts I were calling mine as alcoholic thoughts, a giant ring of space got between me and the thoughts. I didn't know it was possible. I had a breathing room, what we call the pause. Yeah, that pause, that timeless moment in time, that pause. So I wasn't reacting from a thought, which is the idea of being a body, to the thoughts. I was responding to the thought from space, from spirit. Yes? That's where the immunity lies. When you were young, were you trying to get into the moment? You hadn't entertained the insane idea you could have been out of a moment yet. You hadn't. It came later, didn't it? Yeah. When you were playing, did you go home and worry, will I be playing next week? No. Did you go home and call, hey, Mom, come on in my room. Hey, were you watching me play with Wayne? I think Wayne was having more fun than me today playing. I think I better take some playing classes, you know? No, none of that was going on. You weren't thinking your room was too small or your mother was ugly or you should have Gap clothes on. None of that had developed yet. It develops with the mental state. The mental state is what produces the sense of self. And experiences interpreted reinforce it, perceptions reinforce it, the memories reinforce it, and the thought system reinforces it. On and on and on until the point we need to get so fucking much relief from it, we start drinking. So to me, the original, the original addiction is the mental state's idea of being a self. It's addicted to being a self. And that addiction produces the irritability, the restlessness, and discomfort because it can never succeed. Spirit can never become a thing. It's never going to, it can only seemingly be so. It cannot be so. So it's constantly thwarted, and that thwartedness causes us to seek relief from that. And that's all the shooting dope and the drinking and the shopping and the sexing and all like that. We're all trying to get out of self. And we say it in our own program, self cannot get out of self. The way you have an experience of being out of self is realizing you're not in a self. Self cannot get out of self. Then how can you be out of self? By realizing you're not in self. That's the only freaking way it works. And I'm telling you from the result of it. That's what's happened. All the other missions were doomed to fail immediately because it was self trying to get out of self. Self trying to better the self. Self trying to escape the self. But you can't escape an imaginary place. You cannot transcend an imaginary place. You cannot solve an imaginary problem. The solving of it is seeing that it's imaginary. If you see it's just an activity that's implying you're a thing, that does not make you a thing. You see it, and in that seeing it, you're free from it. If you don't see it, you're going to be looking from it. And then that will be a fact. If you see it before it, it's not a fact, it's an activity. The bondage is of self. Without self, there is no bondage. So how to recognize it? Well, first of all, if you see the movements of it, and the biggest movement of selfing is claiming. That's all it does, yes? It doesn't have a life, so it claims the one you offer. Yeah? How does it claim it? By claiming all the faculties that are going on. The thinking, every thought is being used to imply you're the thinker. That's what it's happening. Every feeling, I'm the feeler. Every action, I'm the actor. And the presupposing, which is so beautiful in a weird way, is that it's supposed now but if you listen to it, it presupposes it before. So now you feel like you're conscious. You're the one who's conscious, when you're not. There's consciousness. Do you go to seeing lessons? Do you go to... Does consciousness ever break a sweat in your life? To be conscious, have you ever had a lot of thought and effort around it? When you wake up and your eyes open, does it take, the world is 5 miles, 4.5 miles, getting closer, 3, 2, 1, oh, there it is. No. Everything right there immediately. Yeah? It's not like consciousness is this huge place, and then there's pipes leading from consciousness to us all individually, and we have like a consciousness bill we pay every month, like electricity or water. All right, and then you're going to run out, you get the bill past due, and you go unconscious for a few days. It's not like that. There's an infinite source of it, always available at all times. It doesn't run out by Friday night if you spend it unwisely. It's seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. Some insects have 7 senses. We could have 20 sense doors and it'd be having 20 experiences. And there's 8 billion people on the planet. There could be a zillion of people on the planet and they'd all be conscious. Because consciousness doesn't run out. It's not a thing. That's what we are. We're all right at the point of consciousness. That's what we are. That's where we all meet. Yeah? That which is looking right now out of your eyes, as St. Francis says, what's looking is what you're looking for. Not who's looking. That's what we want to get away from. But you can't get away from who has a who. But by realizing you're not the who, that's what you are. Yeah, it's beautiful in a way. Because then instead of irritability, restlessness, and discontent as your baseline, now it's an ease and comfort as your baseline. There's a word, faith. Bill W. talks about it, I think on page 53. It's pretty incredible. I never hear it mentioned at meetings. But he goes on a long riff about faith. Not a faith, not like Christianity, but faith. To me, faith is a force of big M mind or spirit. Faith, yeah? And he says here, I think it's pretty cool. He does this whole riff, and then it goes, but let us think a little more. And he's talking to people who don't believe in God, but they're totally fucked, So they're at that point, but I don't know. It's like you're dying of thirst, but you don't like the jacket the guy's wearing who's bringing you the water. Oh, no, I can't receive any water. No. I don't believe in you. Well, fucking take the water and keep not believing him. But he said, but let us think a little more closely. I would cut out the thing. Don't do that. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood, meaning fucked, by a certain kind of faith. For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Up here, we're listening to K-Paul. We don't see it as a propaganda station. We seem like a home shopping network, It's constantly giving us ideas. Yeah? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? If there's faith in the thought system, your life is going to be full of anxiety. And the anxiety is going to be grown in an imaginary field, 2 of them, side by side, in no world, which is past and future. And most people, if they're upset right now, it's not based on right now. It's usually based on last week and next week. That's called having faith in the thought system. That's called having faith in a failed system. If you have faith in a failed system, it's going to produce anxiety. Now this is the beauty about faith is going to manifest by the vehicle it's put in. So if you put faith in the thought system, it's gonna seemingly displace you from now to yesterday and tomorrow. Tomorrow will be more important than now, and yesterday will be more important than now, because that which you have faith in dwells there. You'll be living in interpretation. That point when you were a kid and you were experiencing life happening, you will now be having an interpretation called life's happening to me. That's the fucking thing. That's the heist, really. Yeah? So the faith in the thought system is what it allows it to produce the concern, the worry, and a feeling of fear without any apparent threat. So it mimics the physiological effects of fear, but nothing's happening. Yeah? And therefore, let's say in my life, which had a lot of seeming fearful situations, maybe 40 at the most, people are having 40 imaginary fearful events every day before 12 o'clock p.m. They're like under like a sort of an electrocution. Like another earth-shattering event is happening. You know, they haven't even left their house yet. Boom, boom, boom. They're just like this because the thought, the faith is so powerful. It can make shit out of nothing. See, we think Jesus was a miracle worker because he brought a guy named Lazarus up from the dead, but Lazarus at least was alive once. We're making shit out of nothing all day. And no one's, I'm a fucking miracle worker. I just brought 2018 to October 5th, 2016, and I rained on a beautiful fucking day in New York because I thought I may have cancer 2 years from now. Oh, that effect could only be based on faith. It can't be based on 2018 because there isn't one. It has to be based on faith and faith alone. Can you imagine how powerful you are? And the faith, it's going to manifest by the vehicle it's put in. If it's put in a thought system, it's going to manifest anxiety and neuroses and concerns that are based on nothing that's going on. And if it's surrendered and allowed to be put by another power through the auspices of AA, we call it the higher power, allow the higher power to direct that faith, what will happen is you'll have an ease and comfort in your skin now. And now will be the most important event because it's the only event. Not with any effort, it's just like seeing red as red. You're now located where you've always been located, but you're aware of that you're located here. That same faith can either enslave you to yesterday, tomorrow, or enrich now. It's the exact same. Now, do you trust yourself to direct and guide that faith? I don't. So in recovery, we have the higher power. So you surrender over to the care of the higher power and let him reconfigure your life through steps 6 and 7. That's what it is, right? You see something, you see one of those old knots arising when someone's sharing it or you're sharing it, and it's best to catch it when it's right coming out of the bakery, and you go, oh, hey, I'm entirely ready to have this reconfigured, because all it is energy knotted up. And you're not going to reconfigure it. Self is going to fucking get it more knotted up. But if you surrender that higher power, in the Course they would call it the Holy Spirit will take that which you've surrendered and it will reconfigure it and it will enrich your fucking day. Not only your day, another person's day, other people you meet. It's a win-win thing. So the first movement is mine. If you catch that, it's like being in a house. It's amazing because this thief has carte blanche. It runs into every aspect of your life. And when you meet it, you call it me. That's what happens. You're identified as it. You never put it under questioning. It's like knocking on a door. No one's ever showed up for 1,000 times, but you still think there's someone in there. No one's fucking home. There is no self. So the second part, the first part, see, I spent 2 years in a drug and alcohol program, Delancey Street. They have one here, I think, but this was in San Francisco, 85 to 87. And they told me the period of me being Mr. Hyde, though rather long, was over. I was going to be Dr. Jekyll from now on. But I had a strong suspicion they were wrong. And I got out of Delancey Street. They didn't have AA or anything there. And I left Delancey Street, and I moved into an apartment under the guise of Dr. Jekyll, but Mr. Hyde was going to be moving in. The poor girls that had the apartment. And I thought I was Dr. Jekyll, but I was overmatched. Unless I was in four walls and constantly being looked after and told what to do, I'm easy game. The parasite just waits. Took me over quite quickly. And I remember I got out, and during the 2 years of Delancey Street, they don't have AA there, did it? after about a year, I started thinking again, which was not a good move. And I thought I had located the real problem, which was narcotics, which it was. Yeah. But I made a little amendment that I could probably drink, which I didn't run by anyone in the facility. I just stored it up there. And I went on my merry way, and I followed everything they said. And in 20-month mark, they made me a deal. Hey, do you want to stay 5 more years? I said, no, I don't want to stay 5 more years. Because they had a great success rate, but you had to read the fine print. You had to live there forever. You couldn't leave Delancey Street. And I just didn't think that it was a great option. So I said, no, what else can I do? And they said, well, there's a workout program. So I said, I'll do that. So you had to get a couple of things set up, which is you had to get a job. You had to open up a checking account. You had to get a car, and then after 4 months, which would 2 years, I could graduate. And they do this 3-day where they keep you up all night to break you down, and then if you make it through that 3-night hell, then they let you go. And you graduate. That's what happened. And I moved into this house, and about the first week, I went in. I was sitting in my room, which I was going to lose very quickly, and I felt irritable, restless, and discontent. It was only like 5:30, just got off of work, and 11 o'clock was when I'd go to bed, seemed like an eternity. And I really didn't know what to do with myself, and no one was telling me what to do. So I started to get irritable, restless, discontent. My head said, well, let's go back to this bar we used to go, the Rose and Thistle. We used to call it the Nose and Sniffle back then. And it was on California and Polk. And I had a Toyota Corolla. I drove down there, which I lost 2 nights later, the Toyota. I drove down there, and I walked in, and because I'm obsessed with self, I'm thinking the bartender has been getting my newsletter, and I should not have a drink. But he doesn't remember me, and I order a beer, and I have the beer, and nothing happens. Seems like I have immunity, So what happens? I order a second beer. And see, this is the trip. See, narcotics are really far away but if I drink, the next thing I do is do drugs, That's what happens. So halfway through the second beer, it wasn't enough, so I wanted more, and whatever more is to you, maybe more alcohol. For me, it's a different substance. So I looked around the bar to see if anyone I knew was selling more, and the same guy that used to sell more was still selling more. He had like a franchise. It was this English guy. So I kissed his ass, which is unusual for a product that you have to kiss it to get, kiss someone's ass to get it. It's like going into the bank and let me kiss your ass to give me my own money, whatever. So I kissed the ass. The guy sold me the stuff. I went out to my car, which I was going to lose 2 nights later, and I did a line, and it was like that movie The Shining at the end where Jack Nicholson goes through the bathroom door. Here's Johnny. It was just like that. The possession was unbelievable. And then suddenly I was moved over to the passenger side, and we were on a 10-month run. And it's weird because if you've been on a run, it's a misnomer because after a week or 2, you're limping, you know what I mean? And there's no more running in you. And then after a few more weeks, you're crawling. And then after a few more weeks, you're dragged back to that state we all know, which is the pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. Times 12, because I went to 2 years of college. I went to college, became a graphic artist, It was all out the fucking window like that. So what happened to me, I ended up St. Patrick's Day in San Francisco. I went out. I blacked out 2 days. And I woke up in a trailer park about 2 hours north of San Francisco. I didn't know how I got there. Sitting with a guy I didn't know, and we were watching a movie on TV and drinking a bottle of Royal Gate vodka, which is, you probably call it Smirnoff here or something, very cheap. They just put a different label everywhere. It's the same fuel, jet fuel, but it's like 80 cents a pint. So we were drinking that, and I'd given up all hope. I mean, I had hit so many. When I hit a bottom, I called it home, basically. I furnished it, had you over, and I had a strong suspicion I'd be evicted, and it was. And I didn't believe, I didn't know how low I could go. I couldn't believe I could go any farther, but I could go farther and farther, yeah? So I had given up all hope, and so I was drinking this bottle, and this guy had a big head, and a big face, big nose with like a bulbous nose with varicose veins all over his face. And I said to myself, this guy's a bum, But lo and behold, he was looking at me like a bum. And that was the moment of clarity in my experience. And I'm telling you something, it stopped the head for about 4 or 5 minutes, and something downloaded. And I don't like how it says about the first step, the way they say it in the step. I like in the book where it says you have to admit to your innermost self. Because I had admitted that I was an alcoholic tons of times to get alcohol, and tons of times I admitted I was an addict to get out drugs. But this bypassed the mental state, which was necessary, and went somewhere I didn't even know, and it was like a CNN news flash, just a headline, and it was, I'm fucked. Now, I'd been fucked for quite a while, but you know the muscle of denial is fucking good. You're the last one to know how fucking fucked you are. Fucking fucked? Yeah. So this hit me, and at that point, all this new information downloaded, and I went out to a phone booth, called the Lancer Street, but they wouldn't have me back. And then I called up a nurse, and she came up, and in that hour and a half, I had a miraculous alcoholic recovery. I wanted to get high again. Forgot all about the fucking moment. And I get in a car, but the biggest problem was, many of us had at the end, is I didn't have any money. So I had to convince someone else to do what I wanted to do. And she had fallen for it many times. So but I got in the car, and I was telling her, hey, let's get a 6-pack of Talls. We'll get some Coke, get the dirty magazines, rent the hotel room. Now, she had followed that equation with me many times, hadn't been that satisfying for her. So she said no. She said, we're not doing that this time. And she said, do you want a place to stay tonight? That's all I really wanted, because I had nowhere to go. And I said, yes. She says, you got to go to a recovery meeting. And that was my first meeting, March 21st, 1988. And you know what? I've never had a thought or a feeling about drugs or alcohol since. So that thing that my mother couldn't stop, my mother wanted it to stop, my friends wanted to stop, I wanted it to stop, the state wanted it to stop. No human power could freaking stop it, but something stopped it in that trailer park. To me, that was a huge demonstration that something, a power greater than self, restored me to that sanity. Mm-hmm. Yes? And it's the only real solution I've ever met here before I entertained this message. But it's the only event that really could be called a solution, because it produced a state that the problem does not exist for me. That's unbelievable. If that was the biggest influence of your life for so freaking long, it affected every aspect of it for it not to exist for you. And then this message was the final hit, which, because when you realize its identification as self, it gets to a point where the problem does not exist as you anymore. And that's where the relief is stabilized. From you is still based on your condition. As what you really are, there's no condition to spirit. Your solution is always available at all times, right where you are, with no requirement necessary, other than the ones you make up, really. Yeah. That's a solution. So for me, the message that we're sharing tonight is not a path to illumination. Everyone's on a path. I'm on the path of recovery. But what will happen is it will illuminate whatever path you're on. And basically, you are the light that you are using light to seek for. You are the light that you're using the light right now to seek for. If you see what you're not, you'll find out what you are, and you are what you're looking for. Just as St. Francis says, the seeker is the sought. And there's a great Zen master, Huang Po. If you ever want to read something really good, the teachings of Huang Po. I think they're about $3 on Amazon now. John Blofeld. He says a lot of beautiful statements, and the statement he says is, you cannot use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. You cannot use big M mind to seek mind. You cannot use light to seek light. Yeah? So if there's a seeking for the Buddha, there must be an assumption you're not the Buddha. Because if you were the Buddha, why the hell would you seek yourself? You would be yourself. Yeah? And why would you seek to have a spiritual condition if you are a spiritual condition? Just like it says in the big book, the daily reprieve from the act of alcoholism is contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. What higher form of maintenance of a spiritual condition is than being a spiritual condition? This is what this message implies. So for me, this is the light that will illuminate the path. The way of life for me is AA. AA keeps the action figure on the straight and narrow like God rails, G-O-D rails, The principles of AA run my action figure life, and it allows my mind to sort of like, I'm a free-range alcoholic now, you know, just roaming around, feeling content, understanding serenity and knowing peace. All of that came, all of it. The problem does not exist for me. You're placed in a position of neutrality with no thought or effort on your part. You got nothing to do with it, yeah? You'll feel that new power flow in. You'll sense the conscious presence, all of this. Everything that book says about the problem and the effects of the solution, I've had an intimate experience of. And I'm here to tell you humbly that the root of the problem is an act of being identified as a thing. That's what's covering up the spirit and making you try to see the spirit from the thing instead of seeing the thing from the spirit. Yeah? That's it, I think, yeah. I could beat a dead horse, but I think that's good, isn't it? Or tasty. Well, any questions tonight? You do?
Did you ever run into any like significant problems with self after your alcoholism?
Yes.
Can you talk about those a little bit?
Well, what happens when you stop using and drinking? What you're left with? Selfing. Yeah? That's when you really see it.